mass communication
Absolutely.
is a lot more powerful.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you actually realized your purpose amongst adversaries because your heart is screaming out to defend these children in the face of policies that you knew you couldn't interrupt. Because there's no such thing as a river without banks. It's called policy, procedure, and they got policy upon policy upon policy. And you're just this river.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Tortured Superhero. As you can see today, I am accompanied by Dean Okai.
Thank you for having me.
Did I do it right?
You got it right.
No, you're right. I am so happy to have Dean on the show because of so many reasons. The way he articulates himself, for one, really enjoy that. Got a lot to say and does a lot for the community, a lot for young black men. And I'm going to be talking about mental health within the black community specifically in this video. So just to recap on what The Tortured Superhero is about. The Tortured Superhero is a series which is dedicated about men and mental health. The idea of men being superheroes, the breadwinners, the ones who have to maintain the family structure, go out to work, do all of the things that we expect men to do, but yet live within their own torture, and the torture being their own mental, emotional well-being, and how that is often at stake. 76% of suicide in the UK alone are committed by men. And this is a statistic that we cannot deny or fumble because the truth is in the numbers, which basically means that men are suffering and not being able to say much about how they're suffering. I spoke about Stormzy in Decipher a Rapper, explaining that his recent album is all about mental health. So I'm here today with Dean.
Thank you for having me.
Dean, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, I am an entrepreneur, a father, a brother, a friend, and it's all of those things that I approach everything that I do with. It is holistic. As men, we're kind of forced. We're not forced. We do. We identify ourselves by what we do. And this is why when you see it's not working so well, that depression can onset.
Interesting you say not working so well, because I think it's all in the functioning. It's holistic.
It has to be.
The therapy, so I'm a psychotherapist and I practice REBT, CBT, which is about your thoughts, your emotions linking to your behaviour. And we always see the problem in the behaviour. Yeah. And what we tend to do is try to change the behaviour, when actually that's not going to work. It's about changing the thoughts and managing the emotions. Yep. The emotions are too big. We can't control our emotions, but we can control the thoughts attached to the emotion. And this was the birthing of The Tortured Superhero, linking it to that of Marvel Comics superheroes, how they have their own confusion and confliction within the way that they live a double life even. And for men, I think for everyone, we do have a double life. I mean, we have multiple lives, some of us, because we just to get in between. But I think as a man, having to deal with the fact that we teach men in society to be strong, don't cry, big girl's blouse, sort yourself out, but then where does that softer part come through? And I think as time goes on, there's a conflict.
Definitely.
With how to be soft, how to not be soft and weak, and how to confuse weak and soft, and how to be emotional and actually just be yourself, accepting the feelings that you have. I
concur with the last part. And for me, when we talk about that balance, it comes down to the community that you create for yourself. So I have, possibly for my years, an inordinate amount of brothers around me that I consider a support system. I'll speak to people that aren't functioning. So I don't need anybody, I don't have... Now, the more functional I find people are, the bigger support circles there are. So we have people for different needs in our lives. And I know I have a set of brothers, all of them I can have a drink with and be naked and we can be ourselves. Because there's no shame in a man being who he is with brothers. Nobody has any nefarious side. There's no usury. We're not gossips. So you're in a safe environment of peers where you can just be yourself.
I feel like I want to stand up and start clapping and shout amen. But you're right.
But we just need to identify.
Yeah, no, we do. And I think what happens is we've been, where the confusion has been setting from birth, from men growing up in communities and some the cultural difference as well, and understanding the self. One of the reasons I do what I do is mainly because of the work I did in schools, which was with young men. And what I found, well, I'll read this to you. So I always do research on a show, and also with the topic that we're going to be talking about, which is going to be predominantly about black mental health. We're going to be talking about men, not completely men, because we have black women as well.
Naturally.
Some here. But talking
some
about...
of our men are the cause, unfortunately.
Well, the thing is...
And women may say the same.
Well, I would say for a boy to have a problem, there would have been a problem at home with the person who's raised him.
Yeah.
Which would have been mum or dad.
Absolutely.
And often I find, not just single parent families, because there are some very functional single parent families. Absolutely. So I think I'm not blaming mums and not blaming dads, but it is in our caregivers where the problem starts.
Absolutely.
So once you can recognise that without, it's not you've done this to me, it's your fault. No, take responsibility.
They're working
now
with what they had.
Yes.
But as an inheritor of that, it's incumbent on you to heal yourself.
Absolutely.
And identify
responsibility.
The tools.
So I do a podcast as well, and the podcasts that I do on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday are more in depth about the work that I do, supporting. Basically, it's providing a platform of support, because this is what I do, and this is the idea, is to actually raise a platform of awareness so we can have this conversation. And I believe men need to have this conversation, and I believe in the black community we need to have this conversation. So when I do research in mental health and I look at the black community, it always just despairs me. I have to put down the laptop, I have to move away, because the information is so blatant. We know it anyway, but it is harsh. So this was one thing I picked up on. Tell me what you think about this. So they say, it's written, black Caribbean people have the highest rate of detention under the Mental Health Act.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. And out of all the ethnic minority groups, I'm using the word ethnic minority groups only as an identification, so we recognise
it's legal. It's a legal term.
It's not something I personally call myself.
It's a legal term.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm not here rooting for that label. So out at 254 detentions per 100,000 people. It's quite a lot, as opposed to white British people, 69% per 100,000 people. So black adults are most likely to use mental health and learning difficulty services out of ethnic groups, out of all the ethnic groups, okay, where all the data was reliable. Yeah. So nearly 4,800 adults per 100,000 of the black Caribbean population did so. So we're starting to use them, which is brilliant, okay, because I do believe as black people in the world, we're still suffering mentally and emotionally. It hasn't been that long that it was concurred that we're human. If we look at it in reality, it's been 100 years or so that the world said, no, actually,
it's less than 100 years.
It's less than 100 years, isn't it? Because it was 18 something, so we're not quite there yet. We might be just maybe, but it was definitely, we were told we weren't human beings. We were non-human, which is why it was okay to treat us in the manner which we were treated. So it would make complete and utter sense that we would be mentally and emotionally disturbed within ourselves.
Without therapy.
Hence why I became a therapist. Because there aren't many of us. We're growing now.
Yeah.
Definitely growing now. But it's a big deal because we are suffering.
Yes.
And the reasons why we're suffering is because it's deep-rooted. And as Dr. Joy says, the poison's in the cookies. And it's how we deliver information about ourselves to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going natural at age 14, which was unheard of.
Absolutely.
In the 90s. And I was told that I should keep my hair relaxed and maintain,
to have the option.
And my hair was too thick and it was too afro and it was too black and I remember one day looking in the mirror, and I just turned 14, and I said, I can't do this anymore. Every time I look in the mirror, I've got to accept that this person is ugly and needs to be changed. And the one thing about us that separates us from everybody in the entire world is our hair.
Which has life and grows up. God bless.
See, I love that analogy. So it is our hair, and I knew at that age I had to find some kind of comfort in myself to be myself, because I couldn't keep doing this. And there was a girl at school who she was mixed race, and she used to say to me, "Oh, your hair's ugly. You wish your hair was like this." And
because she hears that at home.
And this is it. The poison's in the cookies. We're constantly in a state of conflict about ourselves, about how we look, where we should be. So then we start behaving like caricatures. We start performing. We don't know how to behave. When inside, internally, we're being ripped apart. We're ripping ourselves apart because we're going home and our parents are saying one thing to us. Our peers are saying another thing to us. The workplace is saying another thing to us. And I've got to accept that I'm not going to get through life with my afro hair.
Yeah.
And I did lots of afro hairstyles, really traditional ones. I just couldn't fight. There was no point in fighting
your spirit.
I couldn't. But the one thing, you're going to fight my hair, and learning about what goes into relaxer.
Yep.
Recognizing
fibroids and affects your ability to procreate.
I used to think to myself, it makes sense when I see a woman who's a bit unstable. When I look at her hair, and I do, and think
they correlate
totally, because our skin is not plastic. It's got to soak it in, and this is where your brain is. So if we are already accepting these things as actions that we do in the bleaching of our skin, we have a problem.
Absolutely.
It's not that we're stupid. It's not that we have a problem. We've got to change the problem internally. It's got to happen from the mindset. It's got to happen from how you view yourself. It's got to happen from how you interpret the world, the way you interact. And that was really my main calling, because I learned it via myself. I had to accept myself. And then my sister was getting married at the time, and I had recently gone natural, and she said, "You can't come to my wedding with your hair like that. We're going to have to press it." And I remember a picture of me, and I was really quite frustrated because I had to have straight hair, but it was pressed, not relaxed, and I would have nightmares that my hair was going to be relaxed again. And it wasn't until I found that beauty in my hair, and I didn't lock straight away. I only locked recently in the past few years. And it was just in that acceptance of my entire self, and working in corporate England, where I'm told I would never ever be accepted, and I fully work in corporate England,
where English people feel no way to tell you that your natural beauty, where they would not tell anybody else on earth that, and comfortable. So for me, where the balance lies, where I know I will always be fine, is I have a contract with myself. First, we're behind enemy lines. After that, everything is fair. So if I know I'm behind enemy lines, then I operate on what I call zombie protocols. If it were a zombie holocaust, if it went dark, you are by yourself. You now have to rely on yourself. So there's no sick days, no down days. I haven't had a doctor since the year 2000 I haven't had a dentist since the year 2000. I haven't taken a prescription drug since the year 2000. And I work in a framework that I'm behind enemy lines, and I'm fine with it. Everything you do or attempt to do to me is fair within your tactics. So now my tactics to counter you are also fair. Now I understand the outcome for you is for you to win. And the outcome for me is for me to win. So now we think alike. And I'm okay with that. So now I find fellow peers who are of a similar ilk so that we can accomplish together. I'm under no misapprehension as to now the tactics moving forward and the play out of psychological warfare. Whatever you use, body shaming, image shaming, that's okay. It's a fair tactic in warfare. These are business tactics created for warfare. It's all fair. And business is warfare. So if I'm a businessman, I know that this is all warfare. And we can do it with a smile. And we wear the same armour. And it's okay.
Well, it is all psychological warfare.
All 110%.
It is.
Yeah.
And you have to go into the workplace, no matter who you are, you're dealing with psychological warfare on a level and trying to get yourself through it as best as you can. Where the black community is at the disadvantage is not knowing where they are.
Absolutely.
And in the confusion of their own mental health, dealing with the fact that the damage is so obvious. And in my segment, which will be out soon, Decipher the Rapper, it's about the fact that all these rappers are so damaged. They all have
what is the source
mental
of
health.
that?
Well, you tell me.
You see, do we really go into educational institutes? Or for us, are they institutes of indoctrination? So if it's an institute of indoctrination, it works for somebody. The byproduct of that works for someone else. Because education works for you. Yes.
Do you know what education means, though?
No, please.
I love this because people say education, you got to learn. Education is about being social. It's about interaction. That's what education means. It doesn't mean sitting down learning algebra. It doesn't mean sitting in a classroom with science. Education is about socialization and interaction. And I remember the first time I discovered that, and I thought that would make a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
But it's the one place our social skills are completely compromised.
Absolutely.
And where we get to learn how to, we're conformed. You're forced in a way to behave. I had given the producer, the DP, your information so we could learn a bit more about you. And because he obviously is a lot younger, and one of the things he was noticing was the detentions. He said, "Oh, you didn't go to one detention," and I explained when we were growing up, you could just not go to a detention. You could not. You could just.
It didn't work out so well for me, but
this is it. And it was because school was slightly different.
Yeah.
It was much more lax.
Yeah.
The indoctrination hadn't completely started then. It's now really...
No, it's not that the indoctrination hadn't started. It had. The containment hadn't started.
The containment, yes.
So when you look at PRUs...
Because it's contained now.
When you look at PRUs as a precursor to prisons, now you're dealing with the containment
because it wasn't,
of young people who are being branded to be criminalized by getting used to being punished and isolated in a particular way. So when you get to the final conclusion, it's not such a surprise.
Well, it's not surprising.
And you're not even mad at it because you kind of you expected it.
Well, they've got used to it.
Yeah.
They've got used to it.
Because there is a grooming process.
It is the containment.
From the PRU.
Yes.
To the prison cell.
I worked in the PRUs and couldn't take it. You're right, because when I was in school, they couldn't contain us. We weren't contained, so I totally understood that story because I went to Peckham.
I'm in a detention. Good luck.
That's how it was. I remember being in school. I think I must have went once just to see what it was like.
Not for me.
And I went out of choice, and then having worked in a school, and realised like, oh my God, they couldn't have done this to me when they weren't doing this when I was growing up. This wasn't happening. Yeah. And it's different. It has become lockdown. Yeah. It has become lockdown. And one of the reasons I left school was because the schools that I worked in, because I did a whole set of, I worked in primary schools, and I went to secondary schools, and I thought, oh, I can't do this because I'm really trying to change the entire world.
and you are creating animal factories. If you treat, so first of all, you talk about socialization. So you segregate me as an ethnic minority and have no sensitivity about that. And then when the new politicization of a sexual economy comes along, an LGBT movement, you will tell me, who historically you've had no sensitivity, that I must just accept this. Now you're going to have a full education on sensitivity training, on the history. But we've been campaigning, and we came here and built this country by invitation at its most devastated time after the war. We received no thank you. And then how they rewarded our grandparents and parents was by illegally kidnapping and deporting them, stealing their pensions, dormant funds in the bank. So why would I be complicit in anything with you? So when I was in school, to take my socialization, one, you're an ethnic minority. So you have to shift your expectations for your ambition. So I didn't even say that I wanted to be a film producer. I said that I wanted to be a BBC cameraman. And it was actually a geography teacher who was doing careers on the day. He's not a careers advisor. He said, I don't think that's realistic. So when I read Malcolm X at 17 and saw that Malcolm had been told by his teacher at 7 years old it wasn't realistic for him to be a lawyer, then going through the entire journey of Malcolm and seeing the articulate advocate that he became, he could have become a fantastic prosecutor or defender. So why would I listen to you? I knew at 18 years old, everything you say to me is to contain me. Now, if I'm free, I'm going to do what I like. And I went on a process of learning. So the socialization of our young people is to indoctrinate them so that they can be contained and expect to be contained and treated differently.
And don't argue. I was told I wouldn't be good at being a counsellor. And I was told I wouldn't make it.
God bless.
And it was amazing because, and also I went through a phase making films myself and told I wasn't going to be able to do that, and I did. I only stopped it because I didn't know where I was going with it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I was stopped because of anything other than my choice. So it's quite interesting how, because this does play. It plays into your psyche.
110%.
And it triggers your behaviour. And I find in the UK that we're lacking seeing people who are established.
Yeah.
So that who can young men look up to? Because half the people looking up to and the things that they're saying, it's like, no, that's not a good person. Yeah. That's not for you. And you start looking, and we end up having to look across the water and look over at America. Then we can't relate. Then we can't. We can't relate.
If you can't even relate to the concepts, look, just to say it very clearly, we may not even be aware as young men of the concepts. Everything derives from a thought. The thought leads to an emotion. How you feel about what you just came up with, that you want to create in the world.
You know, you just said CBT, don't you?
Which leads to a decision, but that must be followed up by an action. Or it's intellectual masturbation.
Well, even with that, what you've just said there, because that is exactly the therapy. It's everything starts with a thought. And when I started saying, when I started my videos and I wanted to understand what my mission was was to change the world one thought at a time.
Absolutely.
And the funny thing was, when I didn't come up with that through thinking about it. It is exactly what I'm doing, because I realized in the school I was trying to change the world, and I couldn't do it in a room with one student working on their behavior. I needed something bigger.
You needed a bigger platform.
And I thought, if I wanted, because I do want to change it. I do think the education system is flawed
hugely
in 10 zillion ways, and in order for me to make any difference, I needed bigger, and that was definitely my plan. It was to directly change the world.
Is your plan?
It is my plan, absolutely, and makes therapy accessible, because the problem is therapy is not accessible. I work for the Priory.
Yeah,
it's private. it's not going to be accessible financially for many people, and also logistically it's not going to be accessible. I remember before I started working at the Priory, and before I trained to, because I started as a counsellor, then I moved on to be a CBT therapist, and there was in that transition, I was watching this show, I was doing my essay, and I was watching this show. It was on about 2 a.m. in the morning, and it was about this single mum. She was mixed race. She had 6 children under 5, like sets of twins. Life was an absolute mess for her. She was depressed, she was anxious, and her house was terrible. And she had this psychologist therapist come in to offer her support because she was depressed, she was mental health, and I saw this woman, and I thought, Jesus Christ. And I just thought, this therapist is going to spend 6 weeks with her, and I was thinking, 6 weeks?
Yeah.
She needs more than 6. She needs a lifetime of change. And she was frustrated with her mum. And her mum, she had issues there. And obviously being mixed race, she had issues with her heritage. She didn't know who her dad was, and her dad was black. And she didn't really like her kids. So she had 6 under 5. How do you have 6 under 5s? That is serious amount of work.
Lack of responsibility as well.
Absolutely. And the psychologist said something, which this is when I birthed the idea of make therapy accessible. She said, look, we need to meet your mum, and you need to build that relationship, because the amount of work you need, the amount of resources you need, you cannot access it.
Transcends your ability.
You can't access it. You're never going to be able to get the help you need, because one, you're not going to be able to afford it, and you ain't got the time, and you ain't got the processing. And I sat there and thought, that woman has been so honest with her. This is the only thing she can do. Build the relationship. And her mum was not stable, so it's not gonna be that effective. It's just going to be marginal. Maybe she'll get a babysitter. Maybe that would be it. But the help she needed, she's never going to get. And I would spend time watching videos and listening to people and thinking, Jesus, this person needs to speak to somebody, and this person needs to speak to somebody. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And then when I came across Jane Elliott and Dr. Joy, and it was like, at last, somebody who understands
Mass communication,
absolutely,
is a lot more powerful.
Absolutely.
And you actually realised your purpose amongst adversaries, because your heart is screaming out to defend these children in the face of policies that you knew you couldn't interrupt. Because there's no such thing as a river without banks. It's called policy, procedure, and they got policy upon policy upon policy, and you're just this river. You're on the river. You are not the river. So you're going to go which way the tide is going, or you better get out from between those banks.
This is it. The red tape. Couldn't be dealing with this red tape, because I'd be working with a young person, and I'd say, look, and I'd be honest with them, you've got to learn how to work within these lines, and if you don't, this is what's going to happen.
But also, depending on their sophistication and maturity, that may work for you or it may not.
That's right.
Because if they're going to go and say, well, Miss told me blah, blah, blah,
that's
you would also you
selective.
going against the time. That's my point. It's
selective.
About the sophistication and understanding and maturity of that young
because
person.
There were so many young people I knew I couldn't have this conversation with. And there'd be very few that I'd be able to say, right, I hear you.
Yeah.
I meet people, people coming from the city of London. You'd be surprised at how, you probably wouldn't be surprised at how rife racism is in these massive corporations around here. And
they're only representative of who people are and have traditionally been. You are behind enemy lines. Your expectation should be for warfare. Now, what tactics are you going to develop?
Well, this is the thing, because when you are coming from a place where there's no support, there's no idea forward, because like we just said, it was only less than 100 years ago the world decided that we were human, you know. So there are sometimes I face little nuances of racism which aren't necessarily what we could call big ugly racism, but it's still bad enough. And sometimes I'm like, how?
But that's okay.
And that's right. You learn, And you deal
But do you
with
know what
things.
else you do?
Tell
You
me.
also teach.
Yes.
Because I experience them
Yeah.
all the time as well. But that's okay, because I'm not just a student. I'm a teacher. Now, let's say you work in a restaurant. And so you're in the service industry. Now, you believe that you're capable of racism. You're not. You are in the service industry. You are a servant. Racism is a power dynamic.
Absolutely.
I have the money.
Yes.
So now I'm going to educate you how to treat me.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have to spend my money here. Now, I'm going to make you abundantly aware that you're a servant. So, for all the myths that you've heard that your skin is just naturally superior, whether you live in a bedsit, whether you earn 15,000 a year or 12,000 a year, we aren't peers. Don't mistake proximity to power for power. Now I'm going to make you aware of who I am. And then after I've done that, I'm going to leave and I'm not going to eat here because you're not capable. That's not what racism is. That's you manifesting your prejudice. See, racism is a power dynamic.
Absolutely.
Now, I can extrapolate myself largely from racism because most of it is economic. Now, when it comes to police, the way I carry myself, I just circumvent it. I'm not a target for you. It's like I've been going to my shop and something may have happened in the area and a policeman, excuse me, I'm not even talking to you. You're not interrupting my day. I can't see you. You're a lamppost. And you're not going to come and tap me or stop. You can see I'm not that guy. Go mess around with the kids in the 6 weeks holiday. So once you learn the terrain, how you navigate the terrain will determine your successful outcome or your unsuccessful outcome. But we're very romantic in that because we're indoctrinated in a particular way, we believe what we're told. And we believe that it's for our own good and protection.
Well, this is it.
But that's a lie.
Do you know, remember when the Brixton Riots they all happened in 2011, I think it was. I used to do a lot of youth work, and I was doing this one about we had assembled a jail cell and expressed what it would be like to be in that. We did a whole workshop with another organisation, and the police came down. So I was kind of like a go-between, working with police and young people. And the idea is we don't want to arrest them anymore. Let's let them see what it's like so that we can do something different. And it was interesting because I remember sitting there with one of the Lambeth police, whatever he was, and he said, there's going to be something big this summer. I said, what do you mean? He said, there's going to be something big. It's going to happen. Something big stirring. Well, how do you know this?
They have intelligence, police intelligence.
How do you know this? And then so another young man said, you wouldn't know this unless you were starting it off in the first place. So you know something big's going to happen. I'm on the streets and I don't know anything, but you do. So something big happens.
Collective intelligence.
He said, I thought, you must, what's going on? And then, literally, 2 months later. Yeah. Well, no, we did the filming. We did the filming of this in April. Yeah. And then that happened in August. Yeah. And it was like, but that's quite interesting. Where is the orchestrated?
We are very naive to understand exactly the nature and sophistication of police intelligence now and social media state collusion.
Well, this was it, because I would go into work just after the riots and I was working with half the kids that were running through. Yeah. And we would be sitting down. This was before the iPhone came, about to start my job, and they said, and my phone has been violated by police sending a picture of somebody who was sitting in the circle.
But it was their world. It wasn't your world.
This is it.
Young people were early adopters of social media. We're late to the table.
Yeah.
But they were fully in that world. And immediately there was a state collusion with social media.
Absolutely. And then we had this complete mayhem. And then we had all these young people being arrested in the middle of my lesson, the fact that I'd heard this in April, the fact that it was all happening now. And it changed nothing for the young people. No. It didn't change anything. They didn't stop doing crime. They didn't stop doing the things that they were doing. It was still very much where the problem lied in how they were emotionally and mentally affected in the world.
But look what was brought into the school. So you take African Caribbean young people, you have police criminalisation as an expectation and saying, we're going to show you this because we don't want you to end up here. Well, here's another version, and let me know if this in any way shifts anybody's paradigm. So I'm the business development manager of an organisation called Access UK, which is employment and entrepreneurial training for young people to set them on their path to where they desire to be. So it's a bridge. Now, we got a program called Road CEO, which is to train young aspiring entrepreneurs in every area of business acumen. So imagine they have been introduced to a Road CEO session, which says, you're an entrepreneur. There are 4 stages of learning. You are unconscious, which means you don't know what you don't know. Now you're a conscious, unconscious, which means you do know what you don't know. Now you're aware what you have to learn. Then you become a conscious, which means you can function. The key for mastery is to become an unconscious, where it's just secondary.
Yeah.
Everything you do.
Yeah.
So now you can train for that which you desire to be secondary for your skill sets in the world. And then I go through like I did before. You come up with an idea that will spark a euphoria and emotion in you. Identify peers to create a business with sweat equity, where you all have different skills. So you have £0, but different skill sets that normally you would pay for. Well, now you're a team. Do you know what you are? You're a corporate board. And it's cost you no money. So now you're a corporate board with sweat equity, and you all have that feeling. Now you've got to make a decision about what you're going to do. After you've made your decision, the 5 of you are going to lead to an action in your respective areas to create a corporation that may be worth millions, but your sweat equity alone is worth hundreds of thousands. So now you compare that lesson to me bringing in police, setting up a mock cell and saying, so you understand, our indoctrination is about containment. It's not about encouragement. It's not about psychologically freeing. It's not about creating aspiration. It's not about shifting their paradigm to one of feeling incompetent to one of actually saying, I can make it. I can be successful. You bring me a guy to do an assembly who's an ex-gang member, who may have been stabbed, who may have murdered, who may have done this. Or you can bring in somebody from an investment bank to say, money doesn't exist. An investment bank has no physical cash.
None.
And you come with an idea and we monetize your idea. You go into a consumer bank, it's full of cash and everybody's broke. So, but we're not taught that, are we? I made it out and you shouldn't do crime.
And this is the thing I would find I was coming across.
Yeah.
And people were gaining notoriety for this past history and this story that they went through, which had no value because they weren't doing anything anyway. They were just rehashing the same story. So the reason why I do what I do is I'm not the soft, cuddly, warm, fuzzy toy. This is the mirror and this is what you look like, and we can make some changes. But you need to identify what it is that you're looking at that you don't want to see anymore. But you got to look at it first. And you really have to
Ugly
look.
as it may be.
You've got to look. If you don't look, there is no way forward. And that is really the therapy I do. And so I find that there is a stigma with black people and mental health, which on certain days I can find draining. I can find it a bit of a, because as a therapist, when I meet somebody, I don't like saying of colour because we're not Crayola pens, but that's the only way of recognising what I mean. Particularly when they're like more like me than not. The fear is, can't tell you anything.
Absolutely.
I mustn't talk.
But there is a starting place at least because you look like them.
That's the starting place. I wonder sometimes though. If because I look like them, it brings about more of that distrust, because we don't trust, and it makes sense that we don't trust, because when we were in captivity, we were enslaved and we were kept an eye on by each other.
Absolutely.
And on behalf of. So there is a distrust. It's are you working for me or them?
Absolutely, it's a concern.
And it is a concern. And because of all of this stuff, what we've had to deal with, we're constantly feeding ourselves the same ingredient Okay, stay here.
Containment.
And stay here. And don't see any further than here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're like this and they're like that until we have this whole segregation. Even between, I find, even with the Caribbean islands, I find it hilarious.
Absolutely.
The stuff that even happens there.
Competitive nonsense.
It's just,
for your boat
I remember
stop.
as a Jamaican descendant, I love to say to another Jamaican, you do know we're not the biggest island in the Caribbean. It's Cuba. And it's like there's no recognition that it even exists.
And the amount of Africans in Cuba.
It's amazing. Amazing. I mean, have you been?
No.
Okay, I would say
But I'm
take
aware.
take a visit.
There is some. There's something in there.
There is. I was there for a while. It was lovely. But it's quite interesting. There's a difference. That when you go there, you go to Jamaica, there is a difference.
But also, you got to remember that the revolution played a huge part in that.
Yes.
And that although a lot of the more South American of the Caribbean islands, so the closer to the States they got, the more a lot of the islands tried to breed out the African slaves. Cuba, Fidel was 100% for the African on the island. And not just the African on the island, but the African internationally. And that did a lot for their psychology. And remember, they're in the little they have based on the trade embargoes, they were taught to appreciate.
Yes.
Now, an appreciation of everything that we take for granted is a massive thing.
Absolutely.
And that goes to the attitude of the people.
And
which is
you
for
say
the
that
nation.
when you actually go there and you see it, you'll see everything that you've just said, which is different because it's the appreciation. It's the appreciation of just having an island, being able to have access, being a part of that. And when I went, healthcare is amazing out there.
Absolutely. Now that was the point that I was saying that I may be there, which is an African program of training African medical staff in Cuba, and then the trade exchange there is to be had, so that it's reciprocal.
Yes.
So for the materials, and this is the same thing that Chavez did in Venezuela, to create the trade based on what we can give you and what we can exchange.
Which, these are the conversations which are important, and these are the ones that haven't been happening. And due to our low self-esteem, our lack of confidence, our inability to be unconditionally self-accepting of who we are, we're still stuck in these dogmas, and we perform in a way, and our self-esteem is shattered.
Yeah, 100%.
It's shattered.
Yeah.
And mental health for us is at the forefront. For me, I think as a black person, it's ultimate. It's ultimate because we still have, the majority don't have a clue that we're still so pained. I was going to ask you, what are your views on, do you believe that, or do you have any ideas about it being the environment that people are in due to the mental health?
The environment is one part, but then you could go to Africa and we say, why is it the same? Because it is the socialization. And the socialization comes from a colonial master. Now they've left the architecture in place. So all you need to control is the framework of the leadership's thinking. So if the leadership are educated here and see that as something that is greater than they have back home, and then they're going to come and get treated medically here, you are still dependent on your adversary for your intellectual capital, for your well-being.
Absolutely.
So now, what opportunities do your people have? Because if we talk about a tortured superhero, there's no more ultimate tortured superhero than a national leader. So if you look at their psychological makeup and the fact that their people can't rely on them, then that's because he can't rely on himself.
Yes.
Now, if he's constantly seeking the validation from his adversary, then that means the economy won't be right. That means the resources won't be valued at their correct market value. And there's no way that nation can be developed. So just take for 30 seconds, because I've skipped from here, because we understand it is not environment, it's the socialization.
And I'm so...
internationally.
Yes.
So just take a leader for 30 seconds, and this is an economic question. And you say, right, we have an unexplored tin mine, gold mine, diamond mine. We're not inviting any corporations to come and take on these licenses for mining. We're going to do a geological study. We're going to put all of these geological studies in a trust, and then we're going to leverage finance against geological studies without raping the earth, not 1 millimeter of it. Do you know how much liquidity is in that? Enough to work for every single nation's combined GDP on the continent. It would far exceed the US GDP of $19 trillion. Just by shifting your thinking based on value. No, I have this. I'm not rushing. I'm not in a rush. So we're not going to go for the mining contracts. We're going to do a geological study. Because if you can take out the bars and leverage money against those, you can leverage money against the uninterrupted cave. And at any time that you want to extract based on the fact that we can't pay these loans back, no problem. We'll mine. So you see, if you shift your paradigm, but that tortured superhero would have to be representative of the well-being of his nation. But he's not, because he was educated here, which means he has a European lens. And if you have a European lens, unfortunately, you see Africans through a European lens. So where's your empathy? Where's your love for those who look like you?
Good question. Because it is very limited when it comes to that, particularly in the way that we see ourselves and each other. Because I don't believe it's environment. And I believe when somebody says to me, oh, because the impoverished, you know, the lack of this, and I'm like, I was raised in Peckham and it wasn't nice. And my mum and dad worked really hard and we had to work really hard. And it wasn't easy, you know.
But there are results that come with that work.
Listen, I know how to live like a king and queen on £10 for the week.
110%.
Trust me, I know how I can make some food be amazing. And stretch out, and nobody would even know.
No.
That for me is a skill. You know, that's a resource right there.
No substitute for experience.
Nothing. Yeah. And you don't. The things that we're fed to keep ourselves as low as possible, mentally and emotionally, I find quite disturbing. But also, even the way when growing up in Peckham, growing up in Brixton, living in Brixton as an adult, I don't live in South London anymore.
Me neither.
I
had 30 years though.
Yeah, me too. I've gone all the way out to northwest, and it's I say goodbye, but because it's the mentality, 100%. Which I find difficult, and I don't want to see an Afro-Caribbean shop sold with all these hair care products and bleaching creams. People that do not relate to me whatsoever and would never buy my product if I had one. You know, I have a service, not a product, as opposed to many people who have a business. But the way in which these shops come about is change yourself. You know, you walk past these walls filled with all the different hair pieces to remind you that you have a problem. Yes. And you've got to buy into, see, the thing is, we got to buy into the concept. So if you imagine thoughts and everything of the social media, everything, it's a currency in itself.
100%.
And you pay with your attention.
Yeah.
And
your spirit.
And the investment becomes in how much you invest in the fact that there's something wrong with you. And how much that chips away at the person inside. And as a black person, it's very easily done. I was never a person who believed that everybody should just be natural. But I am a person who believes that when you hide your natural self, you're only hiding it from you. Absolutely. And that's a problem.
Definitely.
And that for me is mental illness. And I'm not saying every woman out there with a weave has mental health. But what I am saying, when you place this on your head in an attempt to hide yourself, then it's a mental health issue.
Yeah, but you said something very important. You said that media is a currency. Understanding that media is a currency, we would have to master our subconscious and conscious minds.
No,
And when you know that there's no lock on your back door, that is susceptible for entry by everybody with everything, you would now have to work consciously to align your subconscious and conscious minds, and then have exercises to master the filtration process of what you allow to sit and reside in your cerebellum.
Absolutely.
That affects your spirit.
Yes.
Now, if you're not even aware of the psychological implications to being exposed to these devastating images on a regular basis, there's no defense. Now, if it's not society's agenda to actually empower you to know, well, where is it? Now, I don't have so much empathy anymore because YouTube is the greatest university on earth, and you yourself say, Dr. Joy. Now, I could look everywhere, and you jump in the pool, you discover one, and one will introduce you to 10.
Yeah.
So there's something else going on, that we're resistant to our own mental and spiritual reparation.
Absolutely.
Our own mental and spiritual repair.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is what is to be investigated. Why am I in my own way of my mental and spiritual repair? How far has the indoctrination gone that I don't even want to open the door when you can see you're cold and your nose is running?
Do you know what it is?
And you don't want to take any medicine?
Shall I tell you what it is?
Please, go ahead.
Because underlying with us all, and not just any one person, there's a massive fear that we're not good enough.
Absolutely.
And because of that major fear of not being good enough, there's the comparison, and there's the fear of not being accepted and being rejected. And when it comes to being black, the fear is that you're already not good enough. My mum used to teach us, you're black, so you're wrong.
Yeah.
You're doubly wrong.
Yeah.
So when you get into the classroom, recognize that you're wrong anyway. And then you would see how the teacher would treat you. You knew. And we end up with this this secret kind of unspoken consensus. We know that she just treated us differently. We know why, but we're not going to say anything.
And we don't say anything.
But if you do say something, you're a troublemaker.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is mental health in itself.
Yeah.
This is dangerous. This is worrying for our own selves. You're already putting yourself at deficit because you're already telling yourself, oh my God, I know what this is, but I'm going to pretend it's not that. So you got to go home with those demons and those thoughts in your mind.
Yeah, I just used to take getting kicked out of the class.
I was so militant at school.
I would just get kicked out.
I was very militant at school. I was very straightforward, and I didn't. I knew I wasn't gonna conform in any way, but and I did it in a particular way, so I wasn't too offensive. And
I'm a stupid guy. I always had a hot mouth.
See,
and I like to entertain as well.
So I had mastered the art of conversation and recognised how to interact.
Well, I did in my head. But how I delivered it in the world.
He delivered it differently.
I was just an entertainer, and I don't believe that being Eddie Murphy in the classroom was the best way to convey.
And what you think about what you were exposed to at the time, we're told that this is all we can do. You know, I was told, "Oh, are you a singer?" No, but you look like you can sing. No, I'm just black. I cannot sing at all. It wouldn't be nice if I did.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to have to break that one down.
Yeah.
But the fear is that when we open up that door, as you mentioned, all of this stuff is going to come out, and we're going to be faced with something which we don't want to be faced with, and it's going to rock our world, and it's going to be a mess. And that's the problem. So we're constantly hiding. You know, I have these conversations sometimes, and I do focus more with men's mental health because I know I can be more straightforward.
Yes.
And I know that I can be straightforward without worrying that I'm causing offence, because I know that the guy I'm talking to is going to accept it. And the therapy I practice is not cuddly.
If we're not tender like that, we appreciate frankness.
Yes, it is not cuddly. It is really not cuddly. Not that it's harsh, but it is. This is the problem. And I go, when people say, oh, it's the environment. It's not the environment.
It's not the environment.
It's because if you look at me and I am blurry, is it because I am blurry, or there is something wrong with your vision? You know,
It's always about the lens. It's
it is
always
definitely.
about the lens.
So
I have peers. I have come from peers who aren't where I am. And I'm not talking about materially, psychologically. I have peers where I have a brother who I saw his mother break him down. Now, where he is today, I can see that the psychological impact she had, he has not overcome, because you still believe that you could only function at a very local level. So you could say anything fantastic. You could give somebody £1 million and it's just enough to get them 2 million in debt.
Absolutely. I agree.
Based on the tools they've been given. But you would have to be incredibly objective to deal with your parents first of all, and say, because the first thing that comes is upset. And then you've got to say, but they were working with the tools that they had. And you've got to remember, you've also got to look at the age that your parents had you. That both my parents are 20 years older than me. And
you've got some young parents.
My mum and I'm 45. My dad is 66. His birthday's in December. My mum is 65. And they got married at 18 because I would have had an older sister. So they were young. And they were working with what they had. So whatever the deficit is, was for me to make up, deal with myself, so that whatever mistakes they made, I don't make with my son. And part of it was, I'm not going to come to a school where I can see teachers are bullying you and not deal with that and hide from it. You don't need to be there anymore. And I don't need to ask permission. The same way that I didn't need to ask permission, me and your mum didn't need to ask permission when we said, you're not vaccinating him. Well, you have to give him the hearing test and he has to do that. Are you telling me, asking me nicely or begging me? I don't have to do anything. We're going to give him vitamin K. No. Everything he gets in the breast milk will be fine. So, duty of care as a parent. You're not going to intimidate me out of my position for duty of care. You're not going to embarrass me out of my position for duty of care. Now, when we understand that within schools, our duty of care is to protect our child, not to make a teacher, a fully responsible human being, possibly with issues, feel good. I'm not here to agree with you. I'm his advocate. When you can do it for yourself, you can do it for your children, for your home, and possibly further afield. But know what you're about and do it with clear intention. No malice. Function is the outcome. What you're going to do to my child will interrupt their ability to accomplish on a daily basis. I will not allow that as a parent. So I'm very clear about that. And what I do is very intentional. That is the starting point of where they kill us psychologically and spiritually, which is why when I talk about psychology, I go down the African psychological approach, because I don't detract from the spiritual component either. Outside of you have your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, sits your spirit behind that, which is the big observer. Just naturally, you know whether your spirit takes to me or not, because there's a vibration.
Yes, definitely.
And our spirit is our strongest attribute. That is just parked. As African people.
And there's a good point you made about the healthcare.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to wear glasses.
Yeah.
And when they broke, I never felt the need to get them as an adult. And then after about 10 years, I was going for my driving test. I was about in my late 20s. I went back to get my eyes tested, and she said, you don't need glasses.
They adjusted.
And well, what happened was, she said to me, I said, I used to wear glasses. These were the lenses. She said, you never need glasses. She said, that one isn't a lens. This one is barely magnifying. I said, what was that about? And she said, there was a racket in the 70s
the money
and 80s.
From the NHS?
Where the NHS and opticians to tell parents that their kids needed glasses. I remember being absolutely tortured, being absolutely told off by my mum, get your glasses, put on your glasses.
Because somebody
told her, that's why I watch TV like that. And I remember thinking, oh but I never felt. They used to give me headaches. They were uncomfortable.
And you didn't question.
Nothing. And it wasn't until I got to an adult, and now I wear glasses over time as my long sighted, etc. And I've only got those prescribed to me last year. I didn't need them before, and I still went for eye tests just in case, you know.
So just imagine the medicine that we are prescribed that we do not need.
And it was at that point, and you thought to yourself, wow, this is quite an interesting thing. So when it comes to, for me, from where I stand, mental health is everything.
Absolutely.
When you deal with the mental health, there's a natural flow and a process with your entire body that goes naturally with what needs to happen for you. And until we recognise that as a whole people, that we have to deal with this, we're going to come across this stuff. Because I remember coming home one day and just thinking, I think we've got another 1,000 years before the world catches up with the fact that we're like, this is not right. And I would come back and no, maybe it's another 500 years. No, it's definitely 2,000 years.
You got to recognise your tribe.
And I would, this is it. And it would be like, but depending on who I was speaking to at the time, and it would be like, oh my God.
You got to recognise your tribe. Because remember, look, let's not take this into the equation as well. We are actually just representative of all people, not being aware of other communities, downfalls, predilections that don't serve them, and psychological mishaps. So, having worked with a large cross-section of people, I'm aware of people's deficits, and I see them as entry points all the time because I'm aware. So I can choose to use my superhuman powers for good, or I can choose to use my superhuman powers for bad. It's entirely up to me. But I'm aware. So I'm less judgmental of us. And the way that I look at it is, those of a similar ilk who've identified their tribe, who are corpus mentis and are influencers, are supposed to have a secret council to influence the influencers.
That's a very good point. Because
the masses in society are influenced by somebody. Identify the influencers, influence the influencers. So then, if you say, right, what I actually desire to do is to have a 5-year plan and create 1,000 influencers with this psychological message, knowing I don't have the millions that think tanks may have to pump into the educational system where we have these contracts, but I'm going to collude with these of a similar ilk who are quite influential. They have magazines, radio, newspapers, and now we are of a similar mindset, and we are going to pump and influence our people. So the first thing is self-preservation. So when you become aware, you become self-actualizing. I'm my own form of AI. So I'm not going to accept that at work anymore. And then do you know what I did? I became disciplined, I saved, and then I worked with Peter. And then we started something, which was an idea. And then we got a feeling. We told our wives. Then we made a decision. We resigned. And then we created a business. Or we did something. So awareness is key, but you need influencers. Because if you're just, I could say I'm going to talk into the air. I can't exponentially grow that idea by speaking to individuals. This is why mass media is so powerful.
Yes.
And if you really want to make an impact, you have a matrix of solutions, and mass media has to be one of those solutions. Yeah. Because you don't know whose mind you are shifting.
Absolutely.
Who will come on board as a delivery partner.
Yeah. Very, very true. And I think that sums up what we've been talking about. I've realised that I could just talk with you for hours
and
about
vice
this.
Versa.
I've been talking to you and thinking, oh my God, I've really been talking to you. It's been a long... I didn't realise how long it has actually been. But we probably could have had this conversation for another 5 hours quite easily, just recording. I really should let you go back to your family on a Sunday.
In any case, I'm happy to come back.
But yes, I think what you've said is powerful and makes a lot of sense. And what is great is that there's a way forward. So what I take from this conversation, this interview in here, I'd say this was more of a conversation, a partnering of minds, is that there's hope.
Absolutely, there's hope.
I think
until
that is
we
the
decide
point.
that we are hopeless,
Yes.
and we always look out. We always say they. When black people talk about black people, we say they. No, when you say I'm hopeless, we are hopeless.
Yes.
When you say no, I'm it, and say it with confidence, go around infecting those of a similar ilk.
Absolutely.
We are it.
Yes.
Not me.
Because
You attract your tribe.
And I think that is important, because that builds on the self-acceptance, the self-awareness, which is all things that I am totally for, and development, self-development, being yourself and being comfortable
In your own skin.
this
God
is
bless.
it. You've got to be comfortable. I mean, and I do think that being able to wear your skin and your hair, and I'm not against wearing, you might unashamedly just being yourself. And I'm not saying remove all of these things. You might have a particular style, it works for you that day, but the hiding from yourself,
it's not healthy.
It's not. And all of this is a massive sign of mental health. Bleaching is a massive sign of mental health, and this is something which is we're being sold ideas about ourselves on a regular basis, told to conform, and because we're not going to be accepted. Yeah, I go into corporate England and I've never had a problem.
You're respected as a people.
I'm totally respected. I really am. I have never had this, your hair, it needs to be. I've never had this. So I think we need more of these conversations.
Definitely.
To support the emotional, mental psyche of ourselves, and also to state that there's more of us out there who aren't doing nonsense, who aren't perpetuating hate, who aren't dealing with the unnecessary conversation, actually having the necessary conversation. I'm so glad that I met you, Dean.
I've enjoyed the tortured superhero.
Would you say you're a tortured superhero?
I would definitely say that, and I have many, many brothers who are tortured superheroes.
What's your superpower?
My superpower is the ability to convince.
Like that. Persuasion.
Persuasion. Without even the need to touch.
Yeah, persuasion. You can. That's a good power.
It's very good.
That's a very, very good power.
It's worth 50p 1 or 2 days a week.
50p. It was so nice to have you.
Lovely being here.
I'm so glad. I'm really sorry that I've kept you from your son on the Sunday.
We'll make it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching, and we will be back with more Tortured Superhero. If any of the subjects that we've discussed on this series has affected you, or you want to understand and learn more about yourself, please visit my website, DesireeShaw.com. I always seem to forget my name. www.DesireeShaw.com. As DISREESHAW. I have some quizzes on my website which are geared towards you recognizing your own mental well-being. Check your anxiety, check your depression, check your anger, check your jealousy, check your stress. These are all psychology questionnaires geared to create a measurement for you. Once you generate that measurement, you can sign up to the newsletter which I produce once a week called You Now, because it's all about you now. And You Now is a newsletter that provides you with tangible tools and tips on how to improve your mental, emotional well-being. So thank you so much for watching, and thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.